A homeless person with $5 of materials can stay warmer overnight than you will with a $700 radiator, and the physics explains exactly why. Today, we're breaking down the 5 heat loss pathways your radiator completely ignores and building the system that blocks all of them. Your $700 radiator is solving the wrong problem, and that's why you're still cold. Here's what it actually does. It heats the entire volume of air in a room using convection. Warm air rises, cool air falls, and the radiator keeps cycling to replace the heat that constantly escapes through your walls, windows, and floor. You're not paying to stay warm. You're paying to replace heat you're already losing. Now here's the number that changes everything. Your body generates roughly 100 watts of heat at rest. That's the same output as a standard incandescent light bulb, running constantly as long as you're alive. The real question isn't how to generate more heat, it's how to stop throwing away the heat you're already producing. Your radiator never asks that question. The $5 system answers nothing else. Military cold weather survival training identifies 5 distinct pathways where your body loses thermal energy. Here's all 5 of them. Number 1. Conduction. Conduction is direct heat transfer through physical contact with a cold surface. If you're sitting or lying on cold concrete, that surface drains your body heat 25 times faster than cold air alone. The ground acts like an infinite heat sink, pulling warmth out of you relentlessly regardless of how much heat you generate. This is how people die of hypothermia indoors. They're generating heat and losing it straight through the floor simultaneously, and the radiator running on the wall does nothing to interrupt that process. A person lying on an uninsulated floor in a heated room is still in serious danger. The surface beneath you matters more than the air temperature around you. Number 2, convection. Convection is heat loss through air movement. Every time cold air moves across your skin, it carries warmth away with it. This is the one mechanism your radiator actually addresses, which is exactly why it costs $700 and still leaves you reaching for another blanket. It's fighting convection in an open room, which is like bailing water from a boat with a hole in the hull. You're managing the symptom, not the cause. Number 3, radiation. Your body constantly emits infrared radiation, invisible heat energy that radiates outward into the surrounding environment. You can't feel it happening, but in cold conditions, it accounts for a significant portion of your total heat loss every single hour. Think of it like a campfire radiating heat in all directions into open air. Most of that energy disappears into the environment and warms nothing useful. Your body does the same thing every night, and unless you have a reflective surface to bounce that energy back, it's gone permanently. Your radiator generates new heat. It does absolutely nothing to recover the radiant heat your body has already produced and lost. Number 4, respiration. Every breath you exhale is warm and humid. Every breath you inhale is cold and dry. Your lungs have to warm that incoming air to body temperature before your blood can absorb oxygen from it, which means every single breath costs you thermal energy. In extreme cold, respiratory heat loss can account for a surprisingly large fraction of your total energy expenditure over a full night. It's not the most dramatic pathway, but it's the most relentless one because you can't pause it even for a second. Number 5. Evaporation. Sweat evaporating from your skin creates a cooling effect that can actively push your core temperature downward even when you feel dry. This is why the old survival saying, "cotton kills," exists. Wet cotton holds moisture directly against your skin, and as that moisture evaporates, it pulls heat away from your body at a rate that accelerates the colder and windier the environment gets. A person who sweats lightly during exertion and then stops moving in cotton clothing is now wearing a cooling system. That's the opposite of what they need, and no radiator running in the corner of the room changes that equation. Here's the critical point. Your expensive radiator only addresses pathway number 2. It blows warm air around the room and calls it done. The $5 system is specifically designed to block all 5 pathways simultaneously, and that's exactly why it wins. The US military didn't develop cold weather survival doctrine because someone read a thermodynamics textbook. They developed it because soldiers kept dying in conditions where they shouldn't have. During the Second World War, Allied forces in the European and Pacific theaters experienced catastrophic cold weather casualties among troops who had access to standard issue gear and heated shelters. Meanwhile, local populations in Finland, Norway, and the mountain regions of Asia were surviving the same conditions with improvised materials and almost no manufactured equipment. The pattern repeated itself in Korea and later in special forces operations across extreme cold environments. The conclusion military researchers reached was consistent every time. Heat retention through layered insulation and volume reduction outperformed heat generation through fuel consumption in almost every field scenario. The soldiers dying weren't dying because they didn't have enough heat sources. They were dying because nobody taught them how to stop losing the heat their bodies were already producing. That's the exact gap the $5 system fills. Now let's build it, layer by layer, starting with the one that kills more people than any other cold weather mistake. The $5 homeless highway heater isn't one trick. It's a layered thermodynamic system where each component targets a specific heat loss pathway, and the order you build it matters because each layer creates the conditions the next layer needs to work properly. Layer 1, the elevated platform. This directly kills conduction, the deadliest heat loss pathway in a vehicle or improvised shelter scenario. 2 or 3 wooden pallets stacked together break the conductive connection between your body and the cold surface beneath you. Think of what a $200 sleeping pad actually does physically. It doesn't generate heat. It creates a barrier of trapped air between your body and the ground. Pallets do the same thing at a fraction of the cost, and construction sites and loading docks discard hundreds of them every single week. If you're in a stranded vehicle, even a folded moving blanket or a stacked layer of cardboard boxes under your sleeping position creates a measurable barrier. You're not insulating the whole car. You're insulating the 6 inches of space your body actually occupies, and that's the only 6 inches that matter. Layer 2, cardboard insulation. Cardboard gets dismissed as trash, but its internal corrugated structure is packed with thousands of tiny trapped air pockets. And trapped air is one of the best insulators in physics because it conducts heat extremely poorly when it can't circulate freely. 4 to 6 layers of flattened cardboard stacked on top of your elevated platform approaches the R value of commercial sleeping pads. To put that in concrete terms, fiberglass bat insulation used in residential construction achieves roughly R3 per inch. A stack of 6 flattened cardboard sheets achieves somewhere between R2 and R3, depending on thickness and compression. That's not a coincidence. It's the same principle at work, trapped non-circulating air, just in a material that costs nothing if you know where to look. Layer 3, the Mylar radiant barrier. This is where the physics gets genuinely impressive, and it's the layer most people don't understand at all. NASA originally developed radiant barrier technology for spacecraft thermal management, keeping sensitive instruments at stable temperatures in the vacuum of space where there's no air at all. Radiation was the only heat transfer mechanism available, so NASA engineered a material to control it. A standard emergency Mylar blanket costs $2 to $3 and is coated with a microscopically thin layer of aluminum that reflects up to 90% of your body's infrared radiation back toward you instead of letting it escape into the environment. To put that reflectivity in perspective, a standard mirror reflects roughly 85 to 90% of visible light. Your Mylar blanket does the same thing for infrared heat. When you drape Mylar over a simple frame around your sleeping position, branches, PVC pipe, even a propped-up car seat, you're building what thermal engineers call a radiant envelope. The interior of that envelope starts warming from your own body heat alone within minutes, with no fuel, no electricity, and no moving parts. Layer 4. Volume reduction. This is the principle that separates people who understand thermodynamics from people who don't. And it's the reason the $5 system outperforms the $700 radiator on the metric that actually matters in a survival scenario. Your radiator is trying to heat hundreds of cubic feet of air. Your 100 watts of body heat is completely overwhelmed in that volume. It's the thermal equivalent of trying to heat a swimming pool with a candle. The $5 system reduces the volume of air you're heating to the smallest practical envelope around your body. That same 100 watts raises the temperature of a small enclosed Mylar shelter by 10 to 15 degrees above ambient. You're not fighting the cold across an entire room. You're concentrating your natural heat output in the only space that needs to be warm, and that changes everything about the energy balance. Here's the final layer, and this one turns your shelter into an active thermal battery before you even get inside. Fill 2 standard 1-liter water bottles with the hottest water you can safely handle without burning yourself. Seal them tightly and place them inside your shelter system roughly 20 minutes before you plan to sleep. Water has one of the highest specific heat capacities of any common substance, meaning it stores an enormous amount of thermal energy per kilogram compared to air, metal, or most solid materials. Those 2 bottles radiate approximately 500 BTUs of heat energy into your enclosed space while you're still getting ready. By the time you get inside, the interior temperature is already 10 to 15 degrees above ambient and climbing. When you enter a pre-warmed space, your body isn't starting from a thermal deficit. You're not shivering to generate heat from scratch. You're maintaining a temperature that's already rising. Shivering is your body burning calories at an accelerated rate to generate emergency heat, and it's exhausting. It depletes your energy reserves fast, and it's a clear sign you're losing the thermal battle. The pre-warmed shelter keeps your metabolism in maintenance mode instead of emergency mode for the entire night. Your $700 radiator can do something similar for a whole house if the power is on and the fuel is flowing. Your $5 system does it for the space your body actually occupies, using nothing but physics and $2 of hot water. Let's put the two systems side by side and let the numbers speak. A standard wall-mounted radiator costs $400 to $1,000 depending on size and brand. It requires professional installation, a centralized heating system, continuous fuel or electricity, and ongoing maintenance costs. It addresses one of the 5 heat loss pathways. It heats a large volume of air rather than the space your body occupies. If the power goes out, if fuel becomes unavailable, or if you're not at home, it is completely useless. The $5 system costs under $20, even if you purchase every component brand new. It weighs a few pounds. It requires no power source, no installation, no fuel, and no infrastructure of any kind. It addresses all 5 heat loss pathways simultaneously. It works in a vehicle, in an improvised shelter, in a power outage, or in a genuine survival scenario where your $700 radiator is miles away and completely inaccessible. Here's the part the heating industry has understood for decades and quietly relied on. Price signals safety. When you spend $700 on a radiator, you feel protected. That feeling of protection is the product they're actually selling, because the physics was never their strongest argument. A $3 Mylar blanket that reflects 90% of your radiant heat back at you doesn't feel like serious equipment. It feels like something you'd find at the finish line of a fun run. But feelings aren't thermodynamics, and the gap between what expensive equipment costs and what it actually does in a survival scenario is where people get into serious trouble. The homeless individuals who survive brutal Chicago winters aren't doing it because they found a $700 solution. They're doing it because necessity forced them to understand the actual physics. And the actual physics turns out to be almost free. The $700 radiator wins on convenience when civilization is fully functioning and you're inside your home. The $5 system wins on every metric that matters when it isn't. The knowledge costs nothing. The materials cost almost nothing. The survival advantage is absolute. Heat doesn't care how much you paid for the equipment trying to contain it. You now know how to turn $5 of salvaged materials into a thermal system that outperforms a $700 radiator on every pathway that keeps a human being alive. But here's the question the physics raises next. What if you had no heat source at all, no engine, no power, and you needed to keep food cold in 40-degree desert heat? The same thermodynamic principles that trap heat can be reverse engineered to remove it. And a homeless person in the Sahara figured out how to build a $0 refrigerator that works without electricity. That's exactly what the next video covers.